Hey, what's good everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at how to make super heavy percussion that is kind of like this. So basically it's mostly this stuff and just everything in here that sounds pretty mechanical. So let's go ahead and hop over to another project and I'll show you how that kind of stuff is done. So basically the premise of this is an evolution of a video that I put on a really long time ago, which is actually I think the second video that I put on my channel of how to make glitch textures and stuff. Today, since we're in Bitwig, it's going to be a little bit different, but it still can draw off of the same ideas that we used in Ableton. So I'm going to turn everything off except for the essentials, and let's just go ahead and have a look at the first things that make this kind of work. What you guys want to do is you want to find a 128 rack or build yourself a 128 rack that you can use from Foley. If you don't know what a 128 rack is, it's basically a drum machine or drum rack that has a bunch of samplers in it, and each sampler has 128 samples loaded into it. And how you would do that is you would convert this into a multi-sample and you would find all of your stuff that you like. You can use the Cymatics Home Depot because that's free, and a bunch of other things. And once you load in about 128 samples into each of these, you right click and then go to distribute select equally. One advantage of this over Bitwig is that you can actually change or map the selector to a modulator. And so what I've done is on each of these within the selector here to change the samples is I've gone and applied this randomizer to all of the selectors that are within the samplers themselves. What that basically means is every time that I play a pad, it's always going to make a different sound. The next piece that we kind of want to look at is getting this to kind of move on its own. And one thing that you can do is create a chord like this with all of the pads that you have and then add some kind of arpeggiator. One other cool thing about Bitwig is that you can have MIDI effects from like normally having to have something trigger it through another MIDI channel or whatever, just right on the thing. And the reason why is because MIDI goes all the way from the first thing it hits all the way to the other thing it hits. And there's some interesting uses for that as well. So Cthulhu is pulled up and I'm just using the arpeggiator function from this. It's a little bit better than Bitwig's because there's a knob, and that means that I can change this if I want to or turn this and find different rhythms. And then it also has a swing function that Bitwig is lacking. So once I have that, all I have to do is hit play. And it's a little quiet right now, but that's okay. But I basically have a rhythm set up, and if you guys know how to use an arpeggiator, you can place any rhythm or use any arpeggiator that you want to find your own rhythms, because the sounds that's coming out aren't really that important. It's more so about finding an actual groove within this first. But once you have all that set up, we'll go into the processing and we'll open up with an EQ3, Pro Q3, and I'm just boosting a fundamental. Now with this, I'm really just trying to make this have a little bit more bass in it, and so I'm taking a fundamental, actually, it doesn't really even matter, and just boosting that high end. Because whenever you do that and you send it into a distortion, it's going to make a nice change. This is just a saturator with some wave shaping on the top, and obviously that's giving it a lot of volume. Now one creative choice that you can make if you want this to sound a little bit more destroyed or a little bit heavier is you can actually draw custom shapes on the wave shaper, kind of like this, and this will help you have a little bit more of like high end and also a little bit more grit, but be careful because you can definitely overdo it. But as you can tell, it's giving it a little bit more crunch. The next thing to do is to send this through a vocoder, and this is freaking awesome. I love Bitwig's vocoder. Now, one thing that you can do with this, aside from just having it being vocoded, is you can actually change the carrier on here. As I said before, this will send MIDI through, and so if you have a synth or something that you can place into here, which you can do by the way, then the carrier can be whatever you want. Right now it's just on a brown noise generator, and I'm just going to kind of leave it at that, but just know that that's available, and you can totally change the way that you vocode this and make some cool, interesting effects. Regarding this is set to 80 bands. I'm on a bandpass setting with 187% width, and then you can see that it's full range between the low and high section. And I don't really mess with this a whole lot. It just doesn't really give me what I want, but that's kind of gonna give it a little bit more of that metal drum sound, like an oil drum, not like an actual drum. But this is a big proponent, and you can use Ableton, or if you're on FL Studio, you can use Vocoder, which might even be better than this, but just keep that in mind. So the disperser is optional, and this is something that's just going to make this sound a little bit more wet. So let's go ahead and listen to it without and with. This kind of like makes it sound almost like a little bit more Tommy. and you can change where you want to place this, but it's basically just an all-pass filter. There's a couple different things that you can do in order to make it if you don't have Dispersor, but this is not essential. It's just kind of for character building. So after this section right here is entirely optional. What I've done with the transient shaper, aside from turn the sustain up, is that you can actually have the attack and sustain automate a parameter of a nested effect. And what that basically means is that anytime the sustain starts to kick in, I basically set it to modulate a reverb on the size to make it have a longer tail. And this is kind of what that sounds like. Without. Which sounds cool, but I want it to be accentuated, so what I did was I added a Saturn. And Saturn has like just this awesome like tail pulling transient shaper right here that if you pull up, it's definitely going to bring out these nice awesome tails. But the thing about it is that anytime a new sample or a new transient's introduced, it will actually cut the reverb of it. And so it sounds super awesome. I boosted the output a little bit, gave it a little bit of drive, but that's pretty much it. And you can tell that that really gives it a lot more space. One other thing that you can consider that I'm not doing right now, but you might want to think about, is if you have Saturn, you can actually set this to feedback. So this is set to like a F1. You can actually pull this up. Be careful with it. But you can see that you can definitely get some crazy sounds with that. You have to be careful though, because the dynamics is pushing that out. If you stop, then it's going to become super duper loud whenever that's being passed through. So the next thing that I do is also optional, but I'm just giving it a little bit of clipping. Actually, it's heavy clipping. But this is basically helping me tame the peaks of this a little bit. And then I'm sending it through an OTT, which is going to bring up some of the high end. And then the only thing after that is just to make it a little bit louder. So this is the glue compressor from Ableton, as I state in almost every video. But what you do is you turn the threshold up and the makeup up, make sure that the peak clip is on. Turn the attack up if you want this to have a little bit more transient, and the release as well. And this is what you get. Now, once you have something that is interesting, if you want to change the rhythm, you can kind of come down into here and play something like this, give it some swing. That sounds freaking awesome. And all you would do from there is just set up a resampling channel and if you don't want the reverb in there, and there you go. You've got some cool things that you can work with. So I hope this video was helpful to you. It's something that I've been experimenting with quite a bit the past month. I just haven't done a proper video on it until I thought I got somewhere that would be useful to you all. But there's a lot of things that you can do with it as far as making a sound design cut and then finding a rhythm or stretching that out. It's just lots of possibilities. I tried to cover a few different variations, but obviously you can throw your own effects into here if you want. A resonator would be great. Doing some frequency shifting would also be kind of cool. It's kind of up to you, but this is just how I approach these kinds of sounds. So if you guys are interested, then on my shop, I have both this project file on Ableton and Bitwig, and it's going to probably only use first-party plugins. I also have a huge list of samples or processed sounds that you guys can kind of pick and choose from in case if you either want to use them for your own projects or if you want to have something to reference to whenever you're trying to make this. Be sure to check out my website, alckemy.com. You can also find me on Patreon and our Discord at the Fox Den, and join the community. That's all for you guys on this video, and happy producing.